been doing this investigation now for 5 weeks. We haven't been sitting here doing nothing. We've been putting in a lot of hours.
This was a very brutal killing. The victim was pregnant. This was angry, and this was vicious.
Your husband is in jail for murder, and you're drug into that mess.
When you've got such an overkill on somebody, it suggests that it's personal.
Were you 100% involved in this? Were you standing there when she was killed?
We've confronted her with some of the evidence, tried to get her to tell us more of what she knew, and she just accused us of making that up and lying about that information.
I want to see her dead body. I want to see exactly how grave.
She's been buried. She's been laid to rest.
Well, I want to see a picture. You have this evidence. What evidence?
Scientific evidence. And when I say that, that means DNA. You can't mess with DNA. You can't change it. You can't take it away.
We knew it all to be lies.
He did something horrible, and you know it.
You're trying to rattle my bones.
Okay.
She had no problem participating in the planning of this murder. In fact, she enjoyed it.
Love can make people do all sorts of crazy things. People kill for love.
November 13th, 2015, Minot, North Dakota. It's just after 7 a.m. when a local resident dials 911 in a panic.
911, what is the address of your emergency? I just got home, my back door is kicked in, and my girl ain't answering the phone.
The Minot Police Department received a 911 call from Christopher Jackson. He was reporting that his fiancée, Angela Wilder, was not responding to his calls. He had arrived home from work and found that their back door had been kicked open.
He called into the house for his fiancée and his 2-year-old son, and he has not received any response.
Yeah, I'm about to go in.
Okay, why don't you just wait for officers? I'll get them over there.
All right, thank you.
Minot officers arrive within minutes and are met by 32-year-old Christopher Jackson.
He became somewhat disorderly because he wanted to go in and see what was going on, and they had to physically restrain him from doing that. First responders went inside to check the residence, to clear the residence.
It's clean, it's orderly, it's tastefully decorated, and they notice all these pictures on the walls in the living room of Angela and her kids, and they think this house was cozy, that this house had a family. And so then they walk down the hallway, and one of the officers calls her name multiple times, and she does not respond whatsoever. And so they know that this situation is dire.
They found the 19-month-old baby boy awake in his crib, and then across from his bedroom, they found Wilder's and Jackson's bedroom locked. First responders took the baby out to Mr. Jackson and asked for permission to force entry into that bedroom. Mr. Jackson did give them permission to do that.
2 other officers kicked down the door. There was just barely any light, and so it was very dark. So they flipped on the light. They noticed that there were bloodstains on the sheets, but there was nobody in the bed. They walked even further into the room, and that's when they discovered Angela's body laying on the ground in a pool of blood.
There were several visible stab wounds. They were all up around her neck and her upper chest area. It was very obvious that Angela Wilder was targeted in this murder.
It was school time. And with the school being right across the street, I'm ushering the kids across the street to school. And as I'm walking back, they're putting police tape up. I looked at the officer and I pointed at the house and I said, "What is going on? I have friends in there." And that's when he just said, there's nothing I can say. I had no idea what was going on. I just knew that it wasn't okay. Angela, she was very sweet. I just remember being very concerned.
Originally from California, Angela Small had spent the majority of her young life in Phoenix City, Alabama.
I grew up in the same church as Angela. She was really sweet, like timid around people she didn't know, but very extroverted around people that she was familiar with. And so I think she thrived around people that she knew and loved.
Angela was very heavily involved in her church. She attended all of the group activities, all the youth activities. She completed her seminary work. She was very devout to the Mormon faith.
After high school, Angela moved 250 miles away to attend the University of South Alabama on a full Army scholarship. But her path dramatically shifted during her first semester.
She meets somebody, and they begin dating. But then all of a sudden, Angela finds out that she's pregnant. She decided she was going to keep the baby. The Army really wanted scholars to focus on their studies, and so she did have to drop out.
The relationship with her child's father was short-lived. So Angela moved back home to Phoenix City and reconnected with her church.
A man named Richie Wilder was attending that church as well, and he was a growing leader. She really liked him. He had a job, he had goals for his future. Angela and Richie start dating.
Richie was very charismatic, outgoing, very cute and charming, and he fell head over heels in love with her daughter, and he was around them all the time. They got married in January of 2009. They were really excited to see what their future was going to hold, and Richie was really excited to be able to adopt Angela's daughter.
Shortly after getting married, Richie joined the Air Force.
Angela was a little reserved about him going into the military, but they kind of wanted some financial stability, and so that was Richie's way of providing for Angela and her daughter.
They are assigned to the Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota. And they find out very quickly afterwards that Angela is pregnant with their second child.
After the birth of their son, however, Angela and Richie began to disagree about how best to raise their children.
They had kind of isolated themselves up there in the north, and they're experiencing what married life really feels like, and it's hard for them.
And pretty soon things kind of became rocky. And the marriage really probably wasn't meant to be to begin with.
The couple decided to divorce in the spring of 2012 and concentrated on co-parenting.
The custody arrangement was pretty fair. It was 1 week on, 1 week off. Shortly after their divorce, Angela went back to Alabama to visit some of her friends and family, and a man named Christopher Jackson. Christopher and Angela were high school sweethearts. A few weeks after she returns home from that trip, she discovers that she is pregnant with Christopher's baby.
He ended up coming up to Minot to be with her, and eventually they were engaged.
Angela and Chris, they weren't lovey-dovey, like hanging all over each other, that sort of thing, but you could see an admiration that they had for one another. Angela liked school. She had drive. She talked about how much she liked to help people, so being a nurse made sense for a field for her.
Angela enrolls in nursing school. Christopher gets a job at Walmart working overnights, and the two are really trying to make a life together.
28-year-old Angela gave birth to her third child in 2013. And in October 2015, she learned she was pregnant with her fourth.
She was happy. She seemed happy.
But just 2 months into her pregnancy, authorities have been called to Angela and Christopher's home, where Angela has been found stabbed to death with their 19-month-old son in the next room.
I met with patrol officers. They kind of updated me what they had found and what they've seen.
One of the things that the police officers discussed was they could not figure out why Christopher did not go into the house. Christopher instead had dialed 911. It served as a giant red flag to the other officers because if their wife or their children were in peril of any kind, they would have immediately gone into the house, no questions asked.
So we were keeping an eye on him and trying to work with him to get him to come down to the police department.
I saw Chris, just for a split second, being put into a squad car. It was so sad to see the people that you care about in that sort of situation, and there's nothing you can do.
Coming up, detectives learn about an enemy in Angela's life.
The people around him, they've probably been through it. He doesn't like her, she doesn't like him.
And a new romance will be tested when it becomes the focus of the investigation.
I trust my
Let me
husband
tell you something, though.
100%.
Well, then you're wrong.
I don't think that apart they would have carried out this vicious murder, but I think that they fed off of each other quite well.
On the morning of November 13th, 2015, Minot police begin processing the home of 30-year-old Angela Wilder after she was discovered stabbed to death inside her bedroom.
Typical for us on our crime scene unit is we wait until the investigators determine what's going to be needed as far as processing of the crime scene. When we arrive on scene, we'll do a walkthrough. So Angela's body was in full rigor mortis. It was cold. She definitely had been deceased for several hours. She had an extensive amount of stab wounds, all concentrated around her neck and her upper torso, her shoulders.
You could tell that she was either pulled from the bed or slid out of the bed from the blood around Miss Wilder. You could tell just from the scene that there was a little bit of a struggle.
Angela, she had defensive wounds. She had some broken fingernails and some wounds to her hands.
So we asked that her fingernails be clipped for possible DNA evidence.
She was wearing just underwear and a shirt. We could see on her underwear the outline of what looked like a knife blade in blood. It looked like whoever had done this had possibly wiped or laid the weapon down on her.
We had the perfect knife print on her underwear, but there was no murder weapon found at the scene.
Detectives move on from the bedroom and determine that forced entry was made through the rear door of the home.
It looked like some damage to the back door, but there was nothing really obvious that made it appear as if someone had broken in to steal anything or ransack the home.
Authorities finish processing the scene and transport the victim's body to the medical examiner's office.
During the autopsy of Angela Wilder, we learned that she was stabbed nearly 40 times. When you've got such an overkill on somebody, it suggests that it's personal. We knew that we're going to have to start interviewing people within the victim's circle. I called the social services and I told them we had a 19-month-old that kind of needed to be cared for while we dealt with his father. We were questioning the fact that Chris Jackson did not go into the home. Everybody said, oh, if that was me, I would rush right in to see what happens.
At the station, detectives sit down with Angela's fiance, Christopher Jackson, and ask him to walk them through the events of the previous evening.
Christopher Jackson's story was that he was dropped off at work at 10 p.m. on Thursday, the 12th of November, and that he worked the overnight shift at Walmart.
At midnight, his first break, he called Angela. And they talked for a little bit. His second break, around 2 a.m., he calls her again, and everything's fine.
But then there became a point where she she quit answering his calls.
She always picks up whenever I call her. I said, okay, she's just tired. Shot her a text message, said, I love you, told her what was going on with the work and everything. 7 o'clock or 6:50 gets here, and I go to clock out, and I go walking out to the line because usually she's out there. And she's not out there this morning. So I called her to see where she was at. And I keep calling her. And she's not picking up the phone. So I call a taxi because I figure she's just that tired.
When Christopher Jackson arrived back home, the rear door was kicked open.
And immediately I thought something's wrong. Her car is still here. She didn't leave. She would have answered the phone.
Did you go into the house?
Something in my stomach said not to.
So you never went in the house?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Even though your child's in there and your wife is in there?
I know it seems hard to understand.
I felt like he was scared to go in until somebody's in that situation and worried about what they're going to find. I don't think people really know how they're going to react. Everything that Mr. Jackson was telling the detectives seemed to be legitimate. He seemed to be being honest, but we couldn't just take his word for it. We would have to cooperate with Walmart and just make sure that he's not in any way involved in this murder.
Detectives ask if they can take samples of his DNA for comparison. He quickly complies.
Then the detectives give him a little break for a little bit. And in that break, the camera is still rolling in the interview room. And it catches Christopher calling Angela's sister.
They find Richie Wilder.
At this point, we needed more information on what he knew about Richie's involvement in this murder.
In Minot, North Dakota, the fiancé of murder victim Angela Wilder has just called out Angela's ex-husband as a person of interest, and detectives need to know why. They return to the interrogation room and press Christopher Jackson for more details.
What's the relationship like with Richie?
If you can name it, they've probably been through it. He doesn't like her, she doesn't like him.
According to Christopher, Angela confided in him that her marriage to Richie ended under volatile circumstances.
He was beating the out of her, and they got divorced over it.
Christopher claims the conflict continued even after their divorce.
There was constant fighting over the custody of the kids, to the point where Angela and Richie couldn't even do the weekly exchange.
Angela was having like anxiety attacks and just panicking and stuff after seeing him, so instead of her taking and dropping off the kids and everything, I always went, so I walked the kids in so she never had to see him or anything.
Detectives knew that they would have to verify Christopher's alibi, and now it was time to talk to Richie Wilder.
Detectives end their interview with Christopher, and a few hours later bring Richie in for questioning.
Hello. Hi, are you Richie?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Richie. My name's Detective Krista Mattias, Sergeant Detective Dave Goodman.
We're doing an investigation here, and obviously this is serious. And I'll tell you, Angela's dead.
Oh, really?
He made the comment very nonchalantly, oh, really? And didn't seem to be too concerned about that at all. I'll tell you what, there's a lot of fingers pointing right at you.
Well, yeah. Because I'm her ex-husband, right?
Well, you're her ex-husband, and you guys have a volatile relationship.
Yeah.
Your history.
Yeah, we don't have a good history.
Richie denies abusing Angela and instead makes his own shocking accusation.
Richie claims that Angela started abusing their older daughter.
She abused twice. I reported her both times. At the same time, I ended up filing for divorce.
Richie claims he would never hurt his ex-wife, but detectives are skeptical.
How can you prove to me that I'm looking at the wrong person?
Well, I don't know when this happened, but I know yesterday I was with my kids, and Cindy came home, and we had dinner, and I went to work, and I came home, and I slept.
Richie explains that Cynthia Wilder, or Cindy to her friends and family, is his current wife. They had met in 2012 while working part-time at the Minot Vocational Center.
Richie is quirky and funny, and Cynthia right away is just really taken by this guy and really enjoys his personality. She actually went through the employee directory and found Richie's number and texted him and asked him if he was available for a date that night. Within a few months, they're living together.
Richie seemed nice and cordial, and she was happy and doing good, and it seemed like life was really good for her.
And by April, Cynthia was pregnant.
The couple married in August 2013.
After Cindy has their daughter, she graduates from Minot State University with a degree in teaching. It wasn't long before she was offered a position to have her own kindergarten room.
She loved teaching and loved having all the kids and all the different things she was doing. And so, yeah, it seemed like life was really good for her, and I was happy about that.
Richie Wilder said that his wife was in bed, Cindy Wilder was in bed, and that she could verify that he was at home all night. I had noticed while we were sitting there talking with Richie that he had a scratch on his cheek, and it was clear at the autopsy that Angela Wilder had fought back. What happened to your face?
Where?
You
Right
got
here?
a scratch on your
Yeah,
face.
that's not my fun. We play wrestle / play fight.
Richie complies with detectives' request to photograph the scratch and collect his DNA.
We ended up getting search warrants for Richie's car as well as Cindy Wilder's Honda Pilot. And after that, he was free to leave for the time being.
Following his release, detectives head to the elementary school where Cindy Wilder works to corroborate Richie's alibi.
We're investigating something that has to do with Richie's ex-wife, Angela.
She's dead. And we need to get to the bottom of it. Telling her the information about Angela, she also didn't seem to be overly concerned about that news.
The detectives asked Cynthia to confirm Richie's alibi, and Cynthia repeats it almost verbatim.
He got home like 11:30, 11:45.
Were you awake when you got home?
I was in bed, but I was still awake, yes.
She said she woke up several times throughout the night to check on their children.
Where was he at when you got up? He was in bed all 3 times you woke up? Okay.
Detectives wrap up Cindy's interview and proceed with the warrant to search her car.
On the passenger door, as I was photographing, I noticed what looked like just a small stain on the inside of the door panel. We took a swab of that sample.
Detectives then execute the search warrant on the couple's apartment and Richie's car.
We did that search and did not locate anything of any evidentiary value that would help us in this murder investigation.
With their suspicions growing against Richie and Cindy, detectives speak to Angela's friends and family about her relationship with her ex-husband.
Richie did make accusations that Angela had been abusing their kids. I personally do not think that was even possible. I never saw that side of her.
Angela Wilder's mother and her sister said that he was lying and that there's no way that it had gone down the way that he had said. They both indicated that Richie Wilder had a very volatile relationship with Angela. They said that Richie had choked her while they were in base housing. So he was eventually court-martialed for that and was given a dishonorable discharge from the military. It was brought up several times by family that Richie's the one that's responsible, Richie's the one that we need to be looking at.
The main working theory was he planned to just remove her from the picture because then he wouldn't have to worry about any issues with custody.
He's got the strongest motive that we have heard so far, but we just don't have the proof.
Detectives received the DNA results from the crime lab nearly a month later.
The blood swab that was collected from the front door of Cindy's Honda Pilot came back to be Angela Wilder's blood. So we knew at that point Cindy had some involvement. The analysis of the fingernail clippings showed that there was DNA under Angela's fingernails. DNA that could be matched to Richie Wilder.
Nearly 1 month into the murder investigation of Angela Wilder, detectives have uncovered evidence that her ex-husband, Richie Wilder, is likely responsible.
The DNA that was found underneath Angela's fingernails was in fact Richie's DNA.
That seemed to match the scratch that Richie had on his face.
Richie's current wife, Cindy, is also under suspicion after Angela's blood was found in her vehicle. But detectives need more proof in order to arrest her.
We felt like we had enough to start on the arrest warrant for Richie Wilder.
On December 18th, detectives receive their warrant and locate Richie at a local gym.
We were dressed with police vests and had some members of the SWAT team with us.
Richie immediately requests a lawyer.
He has no interest in talking whatsoever, so they go ahead and book him and put him into the Ward County Jail.
That afternoon, detectives bring Cindy in for further questioning.
The detectives tell her that her husband has been arrested for murder, and she says there's no way, and she proceeds to be just defiant.
You're trying to rattle my bones.
Okay, Cindy, we wouldn't do this if we didn't have proof. Whose blood do you think was in the Honda?
I don't know.
I'll tell you, Angela's blood.
Where was it?
It was in the Honda.
He didn't leave the house that night.
Yes, he did.
He did leave the house that night.
No, he didn't. I was up several times with the kids and he was out cold.
That's not true.
That's not true.
Cindy Wilder stuck to her story. She just would not talk to us about anything incriminating involving Richie Wilder or herself. We still were very suspicious of Cindy Wilder, but we also knew that there's probably no way that we would ever prove this. We had no reason to hold her, and she was released and allowed to go about her day.
As news of Richie's arrest spreads, friends and family are shocked.
We see his mugshot pop up on our Facebook feed, and rumor mills start going around like crazy. Everyone is thinking, how is he being tied to this murder? Like, what are the circumstances?
As soon as I found out, I had called Cindy and asked her, what's going on, and she obviously was very distraught and upset and said, I don't know, but they're wrong, and he has nothing to do with this. Cindy said he was a great guy, but just kind of watching them interact, I felt like maybe he was controlling and she was kind of going along with it. I didn't know how involved she was or wasn't, but I always felt that she knew more than she was willing to at least tell me.
In March 2016, 4 months after the murder, detectives get a call from Richie's lawyer.
He said that Richie wanted to tell us exactly what happened. Detective Mattias and I went to the Ward County Sheriff's Department and asked that they have Richie Wilder brought up from the jail. His attorney was there.
Richie begins his statement by implicating Angela Wilder's fiance.
He proceeds to tell the detectives this crazy, outlandish story of how Christopher had somehow recruited him into a plot to get rid of Angela.
Chris said he kind of came up with an idea to, like, where I could get full custody of my kids and he could get full custody of his. And he said he thought that she was cheating on him, you know?
So according to Richie, the night of November 13th at 2 a.m., a phone call comes in from Christopher Jackson.
He's like, I'm pretty sure that guy's there. He's like, why don't you come down and get me? And then, you know, we'll head up and catch him in the act. So I was like, all right. So I just threw some clothes on real quick, you know, got in the car, drove to Walmart. We drove back to his house. We went in and we, you know, I just followed him. We went up some stairs and went through like a living room with a light on or whatever. And then he opened the bedroom door. It looked like there was two people in the bed. And of course, when we pulled back the cover, the first thing I noticed, there wasn't a person on the bed. That was a body pillow. But he grabbed her and he just started stabbing her. And, he just kept stabbing her. And I was like, what the f*** are you doing, man? I ran over there.
He's in tears as he's explaining this. And he said he went over there and checked for a pulse.
There was just blood everywhere. And like as I would touch her pulse, whatever, she like leaned up and like scratched the mess out of my face. I grabbed her hands. She was just like, I love you.
Detective Matthijs and I were just letting Mr. Wilder talk and tell this story. He just kept digging his hole deeper and deeper.
Three months after being arrested for the murder of his ex-wife, Angela Wilder, Richie calls a meeting with detectives and points the finger at Angela's fiancé, Christopher Jackson.
The detectives had just received a fresh batch of video surveillance footage from Walmart the night before they were scheduled to meet with Richie. And they had gone through every single minute, every single second of that video.
We were very comfortable and 100% sure that Mr. Jackson did not leave the Walmart.
When detectives confront Richie, he continues to stick to his new story.
What you're telling us does not fit. Because I know that Chris did not leave Walmart during the hours that you say that he did.
He did though.
I know he didn't because I watched him on video. I watched the minutes click by. I just watched that. But you're giving us details that indicate that you were there, and I think you killed him.
I didn't kill anybody.
I think you killed Angela.
I didn't.
Who did then? Because you were there.
Yeah, I told you Chris did.
You can't make it fit, but it doesn't.
He looked at his attorney. His attorney said, you can stop talking at any time. And he said, I want to stop now. So then at that point, he knew that story wasn't going to get him out of this murder.
9 months later, in December of 2016, Richie Wilder's murder trial gets underway.
Richie was in the front with his lawyer, and he looked professional, but he seemed to always have a smug look on his face.
The prosecution presents strong physical evidence, citing DNA evidence that ties Richie to the crime.
Angela's blood had been found in Cindy's car, and Richie's DNA had been found underneath her fingernails. One of the things that the prosecution did have to kind of overcome is that the murder weapon had never been found.
After a 4-day trial, the jury reaches a verdict.
We felt that we were making the correct decision, deeming him guilty.
When I found out Richie was convicted, life without parole, I thought that was pretty awesome, actually.
I heard Cynthia crying in the back. She was so committed to her husband and how he was a good man and he wouldn't do this. Just almost like she had such a hatred as well for Angela. I always had a thought that she was involved somehow.
Cindy loved to get on camera and tell her sob story. There was several times she'd be crying and still expressing her support for her husband and claiming that he didn't do it.
None of it makes any sense to me at all. Like, he's a good man. He's a good husband.
Three months later, detectives receive information that sheds light on the role Cindy played in Angela's murder.
In March of 2017, Matt Walters, a friend of Cindy Wilder's, told us about a Facebook conversation that he was having with Cindy Wilder, and she was making some admissions during that conversation that sounded like she was involved in the murder.
When did you first start talking to Cynthia through the Facebook messages?
She messaged me end of March this year. She started off saying a really leading comment about how the knife wasn't supposed to be the main plan. It was supposed to be a gun, that the knife was a backup.
Detectives ask Matt if he'd be willing to talk to Cindy again, this time while wearing a wire.
He was willing to let us wire his vehicle so he could drive around with Cindy and see if he could get her to make some admissions on her involvement in the murder of Angela Wilder. He made contact with Cindy Wilder, and they go out to a local bar, spent several hours there, and ended up driving home and sat in the driveway. And she began to talk about how they had planned this, how they worked together, planning the murder.
Are you mad at your husband?
No, like, I'm proud of him. I'm just pissed that he got caught and that he got sloppy and impatient, and we like had this thing like planned for like 2 years.
Three months after Richie Wilder was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of his ex-wife Angela, Minot, North Dakota detectives are building their case against his current wife Cindy after she implicates herself in the murder plot.
Matt Walter's vehicle was wired, and Matt slowly got her to start talking about her involvement in the case. She was telling him that they were fighting over the kids all the time.
We had split custody, and I know, like, their mom just talked about me and Richie. Like, I know that. She would, like, call social services on Richie and I.
Cindy says that September 2013, they had a custody hearing, and afterwards she had said to Richie, wouldn't it just be easier if Angela was no longer in our lives?
It's kind of fun just talking about it, just like that rush. And then next thing I know, it's like, it's gonna go down tonight.
Detectives listen as Cindy tells Matt that on November 13th, she and Richie put their plan into action.
Like, she put up a good fight. Like, she did.
Well, I'm sure she was fighting for her
scratched
life.
his face, like, and that's what got him too, was, like, if it was me, I would have gone back and cut her fingers off. I would have burned them. I would have lit the house on fire.
Do you think you're a horrible person, or do you think it needed to be done? Because now you've said both.
I fully believe that it needed to be done. Like, I helped him. We had this planned out, and he it up because he didn't clean the car good enough. One spot of blood in my car.
Cindy's taped confession is more than enough for prosecutors to charge her as a co-conspirator.
On May 19th, Detective Mattice and I went to Washington Elementary School, where Cindy Wilder was now currently working as a kindergarten teacher.
She did not say anything. Much like Richie, once she was arrested, there was nothing more that she was going to say.
In November of 2017, Cindy enters an Alford plea of conspiracy to commit murder.
She accepts the fact that the evidence that the state has against her is overwhelming and enough to convict her on this charge. So she pleads guilty without actually admitting any wrongdoing.
In May 2018, Cindy appears in the courtroom for sentencing.
Cynthia has an opportunity to plead with the court, basically, and tell her side of the story before the judge issues her ruling on punishment.
This is kind of an open plea, so that it's up to the judge what she wants to pose for a sentence. There was recordings replayed of Cindy saying that Angela's fingers should have been cut off and the house burned down.
And so Cindy kind of downplays a little bit the information that she had shared with Matt by saying that she was trying to brag. That didn't really go over very well, given the fact that not many people brag about a brutal murder.
The judge hit her with the strongest sentence she could give her, which was life without parole.
When I found out that Cindy was going to go to prison for life without parole, I understood it, but it's just super hard because I've lost a daughter. But do I think she deserved to be punished? Absolutely.
I don't think that apart, Richie or Cindy would have carried out this vicious murder. But I think that they fed off of each other quite well.
Love can make people do crazy things, things that you don't think about consequences in the long run.
Well, isn't it said love makes people do crazy things? Yeah. But I don't see love in this. I don't see love at all. I see the love between Angela and Chris. That was love. Love does not murder.
I personally believe justice was served, and I would want Angela to be remembered as someone that had integrity, as someone that was kind and loving, as a good mother, and as someone to be looked up to.
Listen to me. Human beings are peculiar creatures. They commit the most idiotic, heinous acts for reasons so small, so pathetic, that they defy logic. They kill over a few crumbs of crystal methamphetamine. They toss away a young life as if it were nothing more than a piece of trash left in a gutter. I have spent my life walking to the shadows of other people's nightmares, and let me tell you, the worst ones are never the ones where the killer is a mastermind. The worst ones are the ones where the truth is buried under a mountain of cheap, cowardice lies told by people who are just too terrified to be human. My. You look at a case like that of Christopher Cole Thomas, and it makes you want to hang your head in shame for the human race. You have to be kidding me. 22 years old, a bright kid, salutatorian of his high school, a kid with dreams of medicine, a kid who had a heart for his younger brother. He was not a criminal. He was a kid who made the fatal mistake of being in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people. I tell you, it is a tragedy that cuts deeper than the blade of a knife. Christopher Cole Thomas vanishes into the night in a town called Benson, North Carolina, on a night that was supposed to be about a paycheck and a long ride home. His supposed friends, Julian Valles Jr. and Jeremy Carpenter, arrive at a police station at 3 a.m, acting as if they're just two tired, lost souls who lost their keys. They weave a tale of a paranoid kid who just decided to run off into the darkness of the woods. It is a story so thin you could read a newspaper through it. Why run? Why in the middle of nowhere? These men, these so-called friends, they did not call his mother. They did not call his father. They just got back to their business. It is a level of cold-blooded apathy that makes my blood run cold. They knew exactly what they had done. They were not looking for a lost friend. They were looking for an alibi. Every time the police squeezed them, the story shifted. A little bit of truth leaks out here, a little bit there, like water through a rusted pipe. They were not there for Thanksgiving dinner. They were there for a drug deal. They were there to trade their souls for a bag of chemicals. And when the deal went sideways, the kid who was just a driver, the kid who actually had a brain and likely realized he was in the company of monsters, was discarded. Think about the internal agony of that young man. He is in a car in the dark with people he barely knows, realizing that he has drifted into a world of violence where he does not belong. He hears the language, he sees the tension, and his heart must have been hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He is not just paranoid, he is observant. He is realizing that his life is no longer in his own hands. And then there are the others, the dealers, Rudy and TJ, and that ghost-like figure they call Gordo. They are not looking for a human being. They are looking for their product. They are predators looking for the person they blame for their lost profit. It is a pathetic, miserable cycle. The victim, the kid who just wanted to save some money for his future, is hunted down by people who value a plastic bag of filth more than a human soul. I look at the investigation, and I see the police like Captain Greg Percy, acting as the only thing standing between these cowards and forgotten truth. He is sitting at his kitchen table, night after night, staring at flickering images on a screen, looking for the tiny piece of evidence that breaks a wall of silence, and he finds it. A grainy image of a young man walking down a street, not running, not fleeing in a state of mental breakdown, but walking toward his own end, accompanied by the very man who would later lie to the police. It is a betrayal of the most profound kind. The parents, Chris and Kathy, they're the ones who truly break my heart. They travel thousands of miles. They use their own money to chase shadows. They bond a suspect out of jail, risking their own sanity, just to get someone to speak the truth. That is not just love. That is the endurance of the human spirit in the face of absolute darkness. But in the end, what do we have? We have a void. We have a family that does not have a grave to visit. We have suspects who play games, who hide behind their fear, who die before they can ever be forced to say the one thing that matters. People think that if you don't say it out loud, the truth disappears. They are wrong. The truth is patient. It sits there, waiting in the data, in the phone pings, in the quiet, the lingering regret of the people who know what happened but choose to stay silent. You see, the worst kind of evil is not the kind that screams and rages. It is the kind that shrugs its shoulders and says, I do not know. It is the kind that lets a parent wonder every single day where their child is, while they go on eating their meals and living their hollow little lives. It is a disgrace. And I tell you, justice has a way of finding its way to the surface, no matter how deep they try to bury it. Eventually, the silence gets too heavy, and someone will talk. They always do. Because in the end, you cannot run from the truth, no matter how fast you drive or how deep you hide. My, you are looking at a story that defies the basic laws of human nature. And believe me, I have seen just about everything. When you spend enough years looking into the eyes of the departed, you realize that people usually act out of predictable, ugly impulses, greed, lust, or simple, unadulterated hatred. But every once in a while, you stumble onto a case that is so twisted, so mired in the shadows, that the truth does not just hide, it vanishes entirely. I tell you, the tragedy of the Jameson family is not just a missing persons report. It is a descent into a nightmare that has no bottom. The facts, as cold as they are, paint a portrait of a family that was desperate. Bobby and Sherilyn Jameson were a couple clinging to the edge of reality, drowning in prescription medication, mounting debt, and a kind of social isolation that would make anyone's skin crawl. You have to wonder, when you start believing the world is ending and that the air in your own home is thick with ghosts, are you still the master of your own house? I suspect they were not. They were looking for a fresh start in the rugged, unforgiving terrain of the Oklahoma mountains, hoping to trade their demons for the silence of the wilderness. Instead, they walked straight into a trap. Though whether that trap was set by a person or their own fractured minds is the question that keeps me awake at night. You look at that photograph, that image of little Madison, standing in the woods, caught in a moment that would become her last known memory, and you cannot help but feel a profound, chilling sorrow. She was an innocent. She did not ask for the pills, the talk of demons, or the paralyzing fear that seemed to permeate her parents' existence. When I hear about them roaming that mountain, acting in ways that observers labeled as a trance, I do not see villains. I see two people who had completely lost their tether to this world. But let me be clear, a person might lose their mind, but they do not simply disintegrate into the landscape unless they are helped along the way. The discovery of their remains years later, miles from their vehicle, is the detail that sticks in my craw like a splinter. You have an adult male with chronic back pain, a wife who was medically fragile, and a young child, all trekking across terrain that would challenge an athlete in their prime. That is not misadventure. That is a crime scene, plain and simple. Someone, somewhere, knows exactly how they got to that spot, and that someone has been breathing clean air while the Jamisons were left to the elements. The lack of a weapon, the missing briefcase, the suspicious timing of the locals, it all reeks of a secret that the mountain has swallowed whole. I have spent my life peeling back the layers of human cruelty, and I tell you, the worst part of this case is not the unknown. It is the silence. It is a realization that justice is often a luxury that the forgotten do not get to enjoy. Those who walk away from a murder, whether they do it for a bag of cash or simply because they enjoy the power of snuffing out a life, are the ones who truly keep me up at night. They think they have gotten away with it. They think the story ends with the case going cold. But I have always said that the truth has a funny way of surfacing, even if it takes years. Even if it only comes out in the quiet moments before the dark finally closes in. You have to be kidding me if you think this is where it ends. Someone out there knows. And until that day comes, the Jamisons are just another ghost story in a world there's far too many of them. Human beings are strange creatures. They commit atrocities for the most ridiculous, nonsensical reasons imaginable, and yet they expect the world to keep turning as if nothing happened. I have spent my life staring into the abyss of the human soul, and let me tell you, the abyss does not just stare back. It mocks you with how empty it truly is. You sit there, you listen to details, and you have to ask yourself, how does a person become so hollow? It is enough to make you lose your faith in the very concept of humanity. This case in the mountains of Montana, the story of young Susie Yeager, is one of those that keeps you up at night, not because of the shadows in the trees, but because of the monster who walked among them in plain sight. It was the summer of 1973, a simple camping trip, a family trying to make memories, only to have their world shattered by a man who treated lives like disposable trinkets. David Meyerhofer, a man who thought he was smarter than the law, smarter than the investigators, and certainly smarter than the parents whose hearts he was systematically breaking. You have to be kidding me. To think that a man could slide into a tent, snatch a 7-year-old child from right beside her sister, and disappear into the night. It is a chilling reminder that locks and walls are only as strong as the person guarding them. The parents, Bill and Marietta, were thrust into a nightmare that no mother or father should ever have to endure. Marietta, the mother, she was not just a victim. She was a force of nature. While the investigators were stumbling through the dark, trying to grasp what criminal profiling even meant, since the field was still in its infancy, she was the one holding the line. She was the one waiting by the phone, recording the taunts, listening to the voice of a man who clearly relished the power he held over them. It makes my blood boil. This Meyerhofer, he was a carpenter, a veteran, a man who blended into the local scenery like a chameleon. He was a guy who asked questions, the guy who acted eager to help, the guy who played the role of a concerned neighbor while his freezer held the frozen evidence of his depravity. You look at his life and you see a vacuum. He was a loner, a man who clearly found the only way to feel important was to steal the innocence and the existence of others. He kept souvenirs, a blouse, a necklace, pieces of lives he had extinguished, as if collecting them made him a master of a universe. He was a coward, plain and simple. He taunted the Yeager family because it made him feel powerful, And the fact that he was allowed to walk free for so long after those items were found in his possession, that is a failure that still echoes today. The profile the Federal Bureau of Investigation put together, that was the turning point. It is a strange thing, trying to predict the behavior of a psychopath, but they hit the nail on the head. They knew he would reach out again. They knew he was a local, a man with military training, a man who needed the investigation to be about him. And yet, the local authorities were so blinded by the faulty science of polygraphs, which this monster passed like a practiced liar, that they could not see the predator standing right in front of them. It is a bitter pill to swallow. A polygraph is only as honest as the person hooked up to it, and a sociopath, by definition, is not burdened by the weight of a conscience. When they finally found the truth in that freezer, when they realized that he had dismembered the children he stole and burned their remains, you have to look at the fragility of it all. He confessed, yes. He confessed to 4 murders, perhaps more, but he took the coward's way out before he could ever face a courtroom. He ended his own life in a jail cell. That is not justice. That is just another final act of selfishness. He left behind a trail of broken families and unanswered questions about other women, other girls, other ghosts who never got their day in court. I tell you, the tragedy is not just the loss of the child, but the way a predator can turn a person's life into a prison awaiting. Marietta Yeager, she chose to forgive. I do not know if I could find that kind of strength in my own heart. To forgive a man who destroyed the center of your world, that is a level of grace that I find hard to comprehend. But perhaps it was the only way she could survive the darkness he left behind. The mountain air of Montana should have been a place of wonder for those children, but instead, it became a graveyard. We are the sum of our choices, and David Meyerhofer chose to be a shadow that finally faded, but one that left a stain that never truly washes away. My, you see, the thing about human beings is that they are fragile, not just physically, but the very fabric of their minds can fray under the relentless, daily pressure of obligation. You spend 40 years being someone else's shield, someone else's provider, someone else's entire world, and eventually, the weight of that duty doesn't just press down on you. It crushes the life right out of your own identity. I have spent my life looking into the eyes of people who reach their breaking point, and I tell you, it is never a pretty sight. Barbara Burns was a woman who had essentially been a mother, a nurse, and a breadwinner since she was 15 years old. She had no life of her own. Her sister, Debbie, had suffered brain damage at a young age, and that was a tragedy that set the stage for everything that followed. You have to understand, there is a certain nobility in self-sacrifice, but there's also a point where it becomes a slow-motion catastrophe. When that inheritance came along, it wasn't a blessing. It was an accelerant. It gave them a taste of a life they were never equipped to manage. It created a fantasy that turned into a prison. When we found Debbie in that trailer, it was a scene that would chill you to the bone. You have a body that has been decomposing for months, and all around it, you have this pathetic, desperate array of air fresheners, baking soda, and potpourri. It is a futile, haunting attempt to cover up the stench of reality. It shows a mind that has completely detached from the world. It is the action of someone who simply could not process the finality of what they had done. Barbara sat in that interview room, and for a long time, she tried to lie. She denied having a sister. She denied owning the home. It was a defense mechanism, a wall built of pure denial, because the truth was a horror she could not bear to look at. But eventually the wall crumbles, and when she finally confessed, she didn't sound like a monster. She sounded like a woman who had been hollowed out. She talked about the noise, the arguing, the constant, draining demands of a sister who didn't understand the world. And she talked about just wanting a break. Not a vacation, not a rest, but a break from the existence that had been forced upon her. People ask me, Kenda, how can someone live with a corpse for 6 weeks? And I tell them, you are looking at it through the lens of a rational mind. Her mind was gone. She was caught in a loop of exhaustion and despair. She killed her sister in a moment of pure, unadulterated madness, and then she just existed in the wreckage. She thought she could hide from the truth by simply walking away, by moving to a place that held her only happy memories. But truth has a way of finding you. It is a tragedy of the highest order. A woman who gave everything, until there was nothing left but a dark, violent impulse she didn't even remember acting upon. She is a reminder that we are all just one bad day away from doing the unthinkable. It is unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. Some people are born evil, yes, but others are created by the slow, grinding machinery of their own circumstances. And, in the end, everybody loses. That is the nature of the beast. The combination of undeniable DNA evidence, the matching broken nails, a totally false alibi from an author, and an ongoing, highly documented pattern of ridiculous harassment towards surely leads the amused jury to a very speedy, unanimous guilty verdict. As soon as the stern word guilty came out of the mouth of the court clerk, Marlene made this incredibly dramatic, audible gasp sound and theatrically collapsed onto the carpeted floor in a stage faint. One deputy rushed over to politely help her up. A couple of other deputies in the courtroom also made their way towards the swooning Marlene Johnson. The judge rolled his eyes and told them to just give her a glass of cold water. The judge firmly ordered Marlene to pay full restitution for the ruined dresses, ordered 300 hours of mandatory community service cleaning the local park, and firmly mandated anger management classes. Justice was finally served. Sweet Shirley, her loving family, and her wonderful fiancé, Chuck, were absolutely thrilled with the satisfying outcome. They happily purchased a brand new, even more beautiful wedding dress with the settlement money. Shirley and Chuck had a magnificent, joyful wedding surrounded by all their true friends and family, completely free from any more ridiculous sabotage. It was a beautiful ending to a very silly chapter of their lives. Chapter 8. Back in the dusty trails of Arizona, the great missing person and mascot mystery was finally unraveling in the most surprising, heartwarming way possible. October 1988. It had been a confusing month since the sparkly pink body of the Prescott Pioneer statue was found dumped in the forest, and the popular teen Pam Pitts was reported missing. The dedicated investigators continually wondered at the bad blood over a heating bill between Pam and her awkward roommate, Shelley Norgard, could have somehow led to the massive prank and her subsequent running away. Investigators finally obtained a warrant to search Shelley and Pam's messy apartment for clues. There were thorough searches of that cluttered residence. It was incredibly difficult to determine that anything unusual happened there in the house, other than an alarming amount of unwashed dishes. There was simply no physical evidence to point to anybody doing anything wrong. There were no pink paint splatters. There was absolutely nothing. They also had what they believed was a pretty solid, albeit confusing, alibi from Shelley wandering around town watching movies. Still at a complete loss for where the statue was actually painted, investigators decided to look much closer at the site where the sparkly mascot was found. And they finally catch a lucky break when they learn there may have been dozens of witnesses in the area on the exact night of the 16th. A couple weeks later, the detectives learned all about a massive, secret outdoor party that occurred right at Gordo's Pit. The local sheriff's office had actually responded to that loud party that night for a noise complaint and successfully chased all the rowdy kids off, telling them to go home and study. The police had come back later and made absolutely sure there was nobody left there, and there were not any dangerous fires left burning. Investigators eagerly interviewed the local teens to see if anyone saw Pam at the big party that night. They eventually found a couple of honest guys that happily said they had definitely seen Pam hanging out at the park, laughing and drinking soda. But some of Pam's overly imaginative friends nervously told detectives that they wildly believed more ominous events than just normal parties were taking place out there. The rumors were flying. One kid claimed he heard a secret society was involved. There were a lot of ridiculous rumors. One of them was about it being a massive club initiation ritual to steal the statue. Back in the loud 80s, that was a very big, popular theme in movies. The wild rumor mill was that Pam was somehow heavily involved in organizing the prank of the century. While rumors run totally rampant in the small town of Prescott, the diligent investigators run down every single lead. But long months pass and nothing concrete materializes. It was a complete and total wild goose chase that came straight out of the high school rumor mill. These were all just silly stories that quickly fell apart under basic questioning. The police looked into them, could not firmly corroborate them, and let the teenagers go with a stern warning about trespassing. But in the bright summer of 1989, after carefully reviewing past witness statements, investigators finally uncover a truly promising lead regarding Pam's whereabouts. A small number of those teenager interviews talked about a massive, hilarious verbal argument between a girl named Melinda Perry and Pam Pitts. The gossipy kids thought the way it happened was that Melinda went up and was talking to Pam while hanging out at the park, and they started to loudly argue over who made the better chocolate chip cookies for the bake sale. During the silly argument, Pam supposedly threw a cookie on the ground. The wild theory was that maybe Melinda was so incredibly insulted by the rejected cookie that she successfully convinced Pam to run away and hide out at a cabin to avoid the town bake sale entirely. Investigators immediately hauled the confused 18-year-old Melinda Perry in for questioning. "Okay, tell us all about the massive cookie fight you got into with Pam," the detective demanded. Melinda rolled her eyes. "I absolutely did not get in a fight with Pam over cookies. That is ridiculous." Detectives pressed Melinda for her exact alibi. She explained that on Friday night, there was a completely different, much quieter party at the American Motel by the highway. I guess there were some people there playing music too loud. So the manager told us to get out of there. I was at the motel eating pizza, not fighting over cookies. All of a sudden, after a long year without a single suspect in the missing persons case, the police are entirely frustrated. They kept firmly asking her repetitive questions and doing long interviews. But she simply was not telling them what they wanted to hear, because she was telling the boring truth. They desperately wanted a dramatic confession to the great statue prank. Eventually, Melinda's silly perjury charges regarding the bake sale are swiftly dropped. Her quiet whereabouts at the motel were pretty well documented by the manager for that entire weekend. And obviously, that minor charge did not hold up in court. After all the pointless drama, she peacefully packed her bags and moved to Nevada to start community college, completely leaving the silly town rumors behind her. Though investigators head right back to the drawing board, nothing sticks. The missing persons case goes fairly stale. It simply becomes a cold case when you run entirely out of leads. You run completely out of people to interview about pink paint. At that frustrating point, the department just needed a miracle to trigger the search again. Suddenly, on May 25, 1991, a shocking discovery dredges the cold case back into the warm light. A group of local college students are happily exploring an abandoned, dusty mine shaft out in the desert hills. When they bravely looked down into the dark vertical shaft, they saw a massive pile of stolen street signs and, sitting right on top, another missing town relic. It was a beloved bronze plaque from the historic library. The sheriff's office came roaring in to begin the new investigation. It was a massive hoard of harmless stolen property, dropped carefully down in the vertical mine shaft for safekeeping. While cataloging the stolen signs, the deputies noticed a familiar name etched into a stolen wooden bench. It was Ray Clerks, the forgetful boyfriend of Shelley Norgard. It turns out Ray's family had actually ended up happily reporting him missing as well. He was supposed to have showed up for a beautiful wedding in California and simply never arrived. That really alarmed his family because apparently he was a very responsible young man. He was actively studying to be a commercial pilot, and he would just never miss a family gathering without politely letting people know. According to Ray's missing persons report, filed on May 28, 1991, Shelley and Ray had still been awkwardly living together at the time of his sudden departure. The sharp detectives quickly recognized that this was the second roommate that Shelley had suddenly pack up and vanish into thin air. They decided they really ought to look into Shelley's hoarding habits a little more closely. When investigators notify Ray's family about his missing bench, they are very clear on who they believe is responsible for the drama. Ray was secretly planning on permanently moving back to sunny California and was absolutely not going to take the dramatic Shelley with him. The relationship was going to gracefully end. Investigators have heard this exact story before. You have two highly independent individuals, Pamela Pitts and then Ray Clerks, who have bravely decided that they are going to permanently leave Shelley Norgar behind. She does not want that. She gets angry, and somehow people disappear, and town property ends up in a mine shaft. Chapter 9. Armed with new suspicions, investigators head straight to the messy apartment Shelley and Ray recently shared with a search warrant firmly in hand. The big break with that bizarre case was Shelley's beat-up old car. When they walked up to the dusty car, they immediately noticed the trunk was completely weighed down. In the spacious trunk, they found absolute evidence that a massive amount of stolen road signs and pink paint cans had been clumsily stored there. There was wet pink paint present on the carpet, and it was the exact same shade of pink used to deface the Pioneer statue. The undeniable evidence is finally enough to place the dramatic Shelley under arrest on June 4th, 1991, for grand vandalism and petty theft. After a couple of years of delaying the inevitable in the local court, she eventually tearfully pled guilty to the charges. As a firm term of her guilty plea to the judge, she finally had to provide a completely honest statement on exactly what happened to the missing Ray and the missing Pam. Shelley sniffled and told the quiet court it all started when Ray officially broke things off. They were out watching the beautiful stars, laying on top of the hood of his car. When he gently told her that he was moving to California and was going to take his two beloved dogs with him, she completely lost her mind. She furiously threw a can of pink paint on the hood of his precious car. Shelley confessed that after that embarrassing tantrum, she panicked. Ray got so incredibly mad at her for ruining his car's paint job that he simply packed his bags that very night, drove to California, and refused to ever speak to her again. He was not dead. He was just ignoring her phone calls. The judge rolled his eyes at the sheer stupidity of the teenage drama. "And what about the statue, Shelley?" the judge firmly asked. Shelley sheepishly admitted she painted the Pioneer statue to create a massive distraction so she could sneak out of town and avoid paying her share of the apartment rent. She used her old truck to haul the stolen signs to the mine shaft just to be annoying. For her ridiculous crimes of vandalism, her sentence was 2 long years of strict community service, scrubbing graffiti off the town walls. The shocking news of Shelley's tearful confession quickly spreads to the relieved family of Pam Pitts. Pam's father, Paul, was just glad that she was finally held accountable for being a terrible roommate and a public nuisance. But the burning question remained, where was Pam? 18 long years unexpectedly passed with absolutely no new leads on Pam's exact whereabouts. The case just went kind of cold for a very long time. At first, you want answers. But as time safely goes on, it is not about anger anymore. It is just about wanting a happy reunion for your daughter. In March of 2011, a dedicated cold case team successfully reopens the dusty investigation. The lead detective started listening to all the old jailhouse phone calls Shelley made during her brief holding period. He actually listened to all 97 of them himself. In one crucial call, she nervously called her dad and told him the detectives were still looking into the Pam Pitts runaway case. She whispered into the phone, "Dad, I am so worried they're going to find out Pam's secret." Her dad sternly asked, "What secret, Shelley?" Shelley sighed deeply. Pam did not get kidnapped. She just hated her diner job and hated living with me. So she packed her bags, hitchhiked to a luxury wellness spa in Sedona, and she has been happily working there as a yoga instructor this entire time. She begged me to never tell her dad because she was afraid he would be disappointed she dropped out of beauty college. When the detective heard that clear audio recording, the hair literally stood right up on his arms. He was like, "Oh my goodness, finally the absolute truth." On June 2nd, 2017, investigators make their joyful move. The detective drove straight to the beautiful, serene spa retreat in sunny Sedona. He walked into the tranquil lobby, identified himself, and there she was. Pam Pitts, now a beautifully radiant, incredibly healthy and fully grown woman, was peacefully teaching a meditation class. The detective waited politely. When she finished, he approached her with a warm, gentle smile. "Pamela Pitts?" he asked softly. She looked up, completely surprised but remarkably calm. "Yes? How can I help you, officer?" "Your dad really misses you," the detective said simply, "and the town statue has finally been cleaned." Pam let out a beautiful, ringing laugh that echoed through the peaceful lobby. She explained absolutely everything. She was simply 19, entirely overwhelmed by a terrible roommate, a boring job, and the immense pressure to figure out her entire life. She needed a temporary escape that magically turned into a permanent, wonderful new life surrounded by healing crystals and positive energy. She was deeply, profoundly sorry for the accidental worry she caused, but she was finally truly happy. The very next day, a beautiful, tearful reunion took place back in Prescott. Paul held his beloved daughter tight, absolutely refusing to ever let her go. He was not angry. He was just overwhelmingly thankful she was alive and thriving. "I cannot believe it," Paul kept joyfully repeating, crying happy tears into her shoulder. "After all these years, I just cannot believe it. Thank goodness." Pam's wonderful family was finally entirely whole again. The silly rumors of dark cults and terrible tragedies were permanently put to rest, replaced by a heartwarming story of a young woman finding her true path, and a silly roommate finally learning to respect public property. The town of Prescott healed perfectly. The pioneer statue stood tall and completely free of pink paint, and sweet Pam Pitts went on to open her very own successful, peaceful yoga studio right there in her hometown, surrounded by the loving family and loyal friends she cherished most. It was the absolute happiest ending anyone could have ever possibly written. With wedding bells on the horizon, life had never looked brighter for the radiant southern belle of Rowan County. Shirley was a vision of joy, a woman so pleasant and outgoing that her mere presence could illuminate the dullest of rooms. She was, in the truest sense, a beautiful soul, an all-around wonderful person who had finally found the true love of her life. She and her fiancé had mapped out a golden future, planning to share a beautiful, peaceful life together in the heart of North Carolina. Nestled comfortably between Charlotte and Greensboro, the fast-growing city of Kannapolis was renowned for its bustling textile industry. It was a town on the rise, characterized by a vibrant revolving door of new businesses and a steady, quiet, family-based community. The streets were lined with upper-middle-class homes, each sitting neatly within eyeshot of the next, boasting manicured lawns and friendly neighbors who always had a wave and a smile ready. It was precisely the kind of neighborhood where the deepest concern was usually a misplaced newspaper or a stray cat. Certainly not the kind of place one would expect to encounter a profound mystery. Born and raised in the neighboring town of Mooresville, Shirley had always been a ray of sunshine in a region famously known for its deep-rooted Southern hospitality. She shared an incredibly close bond with her family, especially her beloved sisters and her brother. Everyone who had the pleasure of crossing paths with Shirley simply adored her. She was a deeply friendly woman, admired and well-liked throughout her community, and highly respected at her workplace. People often remarked not only on her outward elegance, but on the genuine kindness that radiated from within. Back in 1970, Shirley had married, and the couple soon welcomed a precious daughter named Tracy. Being her only child, Tracy became the absolute center of Shirley's universe. When Shirley found herself navigating a new chapter of life as a single mother in 1981, she looked for a reliable way to support her small family. Her determination led her to the administrative department of Tuscarora Yarns, a highly successful local textile company specializing in premium materials. She joined the team as the administrative assistant to the chief executive officer. The office dynamics were often a source of lighthearted humor. Shirley, always a dainty, immaculately dressed, and incredibly well-spoken lady, brought a sense of refined professionalism to the sometimes chaotic world of fabric manufacturing. She managed payroll, organized team meetings, and somehow managed to keep the eccentric executives in line with a gentle but firm hand, often sharing a knowing, humorous glance with her colleagues when the office printer decided to rebel, or when an executive misplaced his own coffee mug for the third time in a single morning. Her colleagues were more than just people she shared a desk with. They were her dear friends. They spent their days working diligently, sharing lunches, and embarking on after-hours shopping trips or cheerful dinner dates. Shirley worked impressively long hours, dedicated herself fully to the company's success. Any manager would have considered it a profound privilege to have her on their team. Yet, despite her demanding schedule, she always found time to channel her energy into uplifting others. She organized charity golf tournaments and grand gala dinners, raising significant funds for people recovering from traumatic brain injuries. This selfless dedication spoke volumes about her monumental heart and her unwavering commitment to humane values. When Tracy grew up and welcomed a little boy of her own, the joy of becoming a grandmother sent Shirley completely over the moon. The little boy was the absolute apple of her eye. Anyone who spent more than 5 minutes with Shirley would undoubtedly hear joyful, animated tales about her grandson and her daughter. By the time 2013 arrived, Shirley's life felt like a beautifully orchestrated symphony. Her family was thriving, her career was flourishing, and her romantic life had hit a wonderful crescendo. She had begun dating a charming textile salesman named Chuck, a man she had known for quite some time through her role at the yarn factory. Their professional acquaintance had blossomed into a deep, affectionate romance later in life. They shared a wonderful connection, filled with easy laughter and profound mutual respect. Chuck adored her, and Shirley loved him deeply. After dating happily for 4.5 years while maintaining their own separate, cozy homes, Chuck asked Shirley to marry him in the beautiful, blooming spring of 2013. She accepted with tears of joy, completely thrilled to embrace this beautiful new chapter. However, the universe sometimes weaves unpredictable and sorrowful threads into the tapestry of life. On the otherwise calm Tuesday morning of July 23rd, 2013, an urgent call to the emergency dispatch center shattered the peaceful silence of Kannapolis. The call came from Chuck, who was in a state of profound distress. He had returned to Shirley's home only to find that a deeply tragic and incomprehensible event had occurred. When the local authorities arrived at the quiet, beautiful house, an eerie stillness hung in the air. The residence was perfectly kept, yet a distinct, overwhelming scent of common household bleach lingered in the hallways, a bizarre and out-of-place detail that instantly piqued the curiosity of the seasoned investigators. They soon discovered that Shirley had tragically passed away in her bathroom. It was a heart-wrenching scene that left the officers standing in solemn silence, taking off their hats in respect for a life taken too soon. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, the detectives immediately began their meticulous work, relying on science, patience, and a deep sense of duty. The lead detective, a man known for his sharp mind and gentle demeanor, sat down with Chuck. Chuck was entirely devastated, his world having just crumbled beneath him. Yet he remained remarkably cooperative and articulate. He explained that he had spoken to Shirley on the telephone around 8:15 the previous evening. He was scheduled to travel out of town for work, a routine part of his job, and Shirley had lovingly offered to look after his dog. During their chat, the phone connection had suddenly dropped. Chuck had not thought much of it at the time, as the cell service in that particular neighborhood was notoriously fickle, a running joke among the locals. However, upon returning the next morning and finding the garage door unusually open, his instincts had flared. He used a spare key hidden safely in a flower bed to enter the home, leading to a sorrowful discovery. The detectives listened carefully, analyzing every word, searching for any inconsistencies. As part of their thorough process, They checked Chuck for any signs of a struggle. His hands and arms were completely free of any marks, and a swift call to his employer confirmed his alibi out of state. Chuck was quickly and confidently cleared of any suspicion, allowing the investigators to focus their energy elsewhere. The arrival of Tracy at the scene brought a wave of profound sorrow. The bond between mother and daughter was beautifully strong, and Tracy was understandably heartbroken. In the midst of her grief, the detectives gently asked if she knew of anyone who might harbor negative feelings toward her mother. Tracy bravely recalled a man named Richard, a former boyfriend from nearly 10 years ago. The relationship had been fraught with difficulties, eventually leading Shirley to secure a restraining order after Richard had made alarming and aggressive comments. Richard had left town shortly after, but Tracy mentioned hearing whispers that he had recently returned to the area and attempted to reconnect. The investigative team swiftly located Richard at a nearby pawn shop. When informed of Shirley's passing, Richard appeared genuinely shocked. He explained that their relationship was a closed chapter from a decade ago. He claimed he had been home alone, sleeping soundly on the night in question, although he lacked an alibi witness. The detectives noted that he had no physical marks on his hands. Furthermore, Richard suffered from significant health issues that severely limited his mobility, making it highly unlikely, if not entirely impossible, for him to have carried out such an elaborate and physically demanding act. Richard was respectfully dismissed from the inquiry. Hours ticked by, and the investigation seemed to be hitting a frustrating wall, until an unexpected phone call completely shifted the trajectory of the case. The call came from Irvin, the chief financial officer at the very yarn factory where Shirley worked. Irvin was highly agitated, his voice trembling as he spoke to the detectives. When they informed him of Shirley's fate, he broke down, deeply saddened by the loss of his wonderful colleague. But his next words sent a shockwave through the room. Irvin expressed a terrifying certainty that his own wife, Marlene, was deeply involved in the tragedy. It is an incredibly rare and sobering moment when a person points a finger of suspicion at their own spouse. Irvin invited the detectives to his office, where he began to unfold the complex and deeply troubling history of his marriage. Marlene had grown up in a wealthy family, accustomed to the finer things in life, and rarely hearing the word no. She was a striking woman, always impeccably dressed, eloquent, and maintaining a formidable presence. When Irvin and Marlene married in 1983, they seemed to balance each other perfectly. Irvin was a quiet, reserved man who preferred the background, while Marlene commanded attention wherever she went. For 2 decades, they shared a prosperous life, raising a daughter and enjoying the comfort of Irvin's successful career. But as time marched on, a shadow fell over their home. Following a severe nervous breakdown in 2003, Marlene's personality underwent a drastic transformation. She became intensely erratic, deeply possessive, and consumed by baseless jealousy. Irvin recounted how she would routinely target unmarried women at his workplaces, spinning elaborate, entirely fabricated narratives in her mind about him having affairs. When Irvin took the position at Tuscarora Yarns in 2006, Marlene's unfounded suspicions locked onto Shirley. Irvin recalled the day he introduced them. Shirley, displaying her typical Southern warmth, had called him honey and gently touched his arm in a purely friendly gesture. In that fleeting second, Marlene's demeanor shifted. From that day forward, she became entirely fixated on Shirley. This fixation grew to bizarre proportions, leading Marlene to hire private investigators to shadow Shirley's every move. The seasoned investigator Marlene hired admitted to police that he had surveilled Irvin and Shirley for an entire month, finding absolutely zero evidence of any inappropriate behavior. But the lack of evidence only fueled Marlene's irrational fire. She sought out another firm, one that used aerial technology to monitor Shirley's home, tracking her grocery runs and her daily commute. The investigator confessed that Marlene's demands had become so intensely unethical and unnerving that he had to walk away from the job, genuinely spooked by her obsession. Shirley, possessing a pure heart and knowing she had absolutely nothing to hide, had largely brushed off the bizarre behavior, assuming that common sense would eventually prevail. But the situation reached a boiling point in 2011 during a cheerful Friday lunch. Shirley and her colleagues were enjoying a meal at a local restaurant when Marlene suddenly appeared, dressed in dark clothing and attempting to conceal her face behind a menu. A waitress, familiar with the office dynamics, quickly alerted the group. Before anyone could react, Marlene charged across the room, causing a chaotic scene that resulted in spilled drinks and gasps of shock from the patrons, making wild, baseless accusations before being escorted out. Despite the chaotic confrontation, Shirley, ever the peacemaker, chose not to press charges, hoping a simple restraining order would bring peace to everyone involved. Fearing for his own safety, Irvin had subsequently moved out and obtained his own legal protection against his wife. Now, with Shirley gone, he was terrified that he might be the next target of Marlene's unchecked anger. He provided the detectives with a crucial lead: a photograph of Marlene at a restaurant with a man named Tim, suggesting Tim might hold valuable information. The detectives immediately sprang into action, securing a search warrant for Marlene's residence and broadcasting a description of her vehicle. They quickly located her car parked outside a legal office in a neighboring downtown area. Marlene, acting on advice, surrendered peacefully. A careful inspection of the trunk of her car revealed an unusually large stockpile of heavy-duty cleaning supplies, providing a potential explanation for the strong scent of bleach that had masked the scene at Shirley's home. Simultaneously, the search of Marlene's immaculate house painted a deeply disturbing picture of an unyielding obsession. The detectives discovered detailed aerial photographs of Shirley's neighborhood, alongside stacks of surveillance images and meticulously kept logs of Shirley's daily routines. It was a chilling monument to years of misplaced anger and jealousy. Later that evening, as the clock neared midnight, Marlene sat in an interview room, her demeanor icy and detached. She wore sunglasses indoors, acting entirely bored and uninterested, completely devoid of the natural shock or sorrow one might expect. She absolutely refused to answer any questions, offering only a blanket denial. However, the detectives, trained in the art of observation, noticed a critical detail. Marlene, who was known for her flawless grooming, had a damaged manicure, and her hands bore small, fresh bandages. The physical signs of a recent, intense struggle were silently etched onto her skin. While Marlene was being escorted to a secure facility, another team of detectives arrived at the home of Tim, the man from the photograph. Tim was surprisingly calm, introducing himself as a published author and a motivational speaker. He explained that his relationship with Marlene was strictly a platonic friendship, having bonded over literature at a local book signing. Tim provided a seemingly solid alibi for Marlene, claiming she had stayed with him the entire previous night to monitor his recovery from a minor medical procedure. Despite his composed exterior, the seasoned detectives sensed a flicker of hesitation in Tim's eyes. Their suspicions were validated the following day when the forensic laboratory returned a crucial piece of evidence recovered from the scene: a small fragment of a stainless steel kitchen utensil that had broken during the tragedy. While searching Tim's home, the investigators noticed a set of 4 kitchen tools, with one noticeably missing. The recovered fragment was an exact match to the incomplete set. Confronted with this undeniable puzzle piece, Tim's calm facade crumbled. He slumped in his chair, staring at the ceiling, and finally admitted that he had not been entirely truthful. He confessed that while he had spent the day with Marlene, she had not stayed the night. The following morning over breakfast, she had casually asked him to provide a false alibi. Blinded by what he thought was loyalty to a friend, he had foolishly agreed, never imagining the profound gravity of the situation he was covering up. With the alibi completely shattered, the final, undeniable truth came from the science laboratory. The genetic testing returned a perfect match, placing Marlene's deoxyribonucleic acid directly at the scene of the tragedy, specifically on the bathroom curtains. The intricate web of science and dedicated police work had perfectly ensnared the truth. The narrative of that fateful evening became heartbreakingly clear, driven by an obsession that had consumed her entirely. Marlene had silently followed Shirley into her peaceful home, while Shirley was simply chatting on the phone. Preparing for a quiet evening of taking care of a dog, Marlene had acted out her long-harbored anger. Afterward, in a misguided attempt to erase her presence, she had frantically used the bleach, inadvertently leaving behind the very clues that would lead to her capture. When the trial finally convened in the crisp winter of 2018, Marlene maintained her poised, almost untouchable exterior, dressed elegantly and projecting an air of absolute defiance. However, the prosecution presented a masterful, incredibly thorough case. The combination of the genetic evidence, the physical marks on her hands, the shattered alibi, and the undeniable mountains of surveillance materials found in her home created an insurmountable wall of truth. The defense could offer little more than vague suggestions of alternative theories, unable to cast even a shadow of a doubt on the solid, scientific facts. It took the jury only a brief period of deliberation to return a verdict of absolute guilt. The moment the word echoed through the silent courtroom, Marlene's stoic facade vanished. She let out a sharp gasp and collapsed, finally forced to face the reality of her actions. She was sentenced to spend the remainder of her days behind bars, ensuring she could never disrupt another life. While the conclusion of the trial brought a necessary sense of legal justice, the hearts of those who loved Shirley remained deeply bruised. They mourned the senseless loss of a woman whose life was defined by kindness, charity, and love. Yet, as the seasons changed, the community of Kannapolis slowly began to heal. They chose to remember Shirley not for the tragic way she departed, but for the beautiful, radiant way she lived. They remembered her warm laughter echoing in the yarn factory, her dedicated efforts to help those in need, and the infinite love she showered upon her daughter and grandson. Shirley's spirit, bright and unwavering, continued to inspire all who knew her, a lasting testament to the enduring power of a good heart. Miles away, and many years prior, another vibrant community found itself navigating a similarly complex maze of mystery, highlighting the incredible resilience of the human spirit and the relentless pursuit of truth. The Prescott National Forest, a sprawling, majestic expanse of nature in Arizona, provided the local residents with endless opportunities for joyful recreation. Families picnicked under the towering pines, friends rode their dirt bikes along the winding trails, and folks practiced their target shooting in the designated clearings under the bright, expansive desert sky. It was a golden evening of September 29, 1988. A local resident was just wrapping up a peaceful afternoon of target practice near a popular, rustic gathering spot affectionately known to the locals as the Pit, as he strolled back to his truck, enjoying the cool evening breeze. His eye caught something unusual near one of the large community fire rings. Beneath a pile of discarded debris that had caught fire, he noticed a deeply unsettling sight. Realizing the gravity of his discovery, he rushed to the nearest town pharmacy, utilizing the payphone to contact the emergency services. Within minutes, the dedicated officers of the county sheriff department arrived at the secluded area. They cordoned off the serene forest setting, treating the earth with the utmost respect as they confirmed the presence of a tragically deceased individual. The scene was incredibly confusing, a chaotic mix of natural forest debris and remnants of weekend gatherings, making it nearly impossible to determine what belonged to the tragedy and what was simply litter. In those days, the sophisticated genetic testing that modern detectives rely upon was still the stuff of science fiction. The dedicated investigators had to rely entirely on their wits, their intuition, and traditional footwork. The medical examiner, a meticulous and deeply respectful professional, gently examined the individual. Due to the extreme circumstances, determining the exact cause of passing was impossible, but the timeline was clear based on natural environmental indicators. The individual had been resting there for almost 2 weeks. Through careful dental comparisons, they finally restored a name to the lost soul, Pamela. Pamela was a beautiful, bright-eyed 19-year-old girl who had been reported missing by her worried family 13 days prior, on the 16th of September. When the local police department officially joined forces with the county sheriff, their first, incredibly heavy task was to visit Pamela's family. The arrival of the officers at the family home in the quiet hours of the evening brought a wave of unimaginable heartbreak. Paul, Pamela's devoted father, was a strong, deeply loving man who found his world entirely upended. He was thrust into a storm of profound sorrow, desperately trying to balance his own grief while comforting his other children, all while his mind raced with questions of how such a thing could happen to his precious daughter. Pamela was universally adored. As the oldest of 4 siblings, she was a natural leader, a wonderful, vibrant kid whose bright smile could melt the coldest heart. She was the kind of person who never met a stranger, capable of striking up a joyful conversation with absolutely anybody. She was outgoing, relentlessly enthusiastic about life, and deeply artistic. Her siblings viewed her not just as a sister, but as a guiding star. She was an incredible mentor, the one they confided in, the one who navigated the tricky waters of growing up with grace and humor. Pamela had dreams of attending a beauty academy or diving into the world of fashion design, her creative spirit always searching for a canvas. Just a few months prior, at the tender age of 19, Pamela had decided she was ready to spread her wings and experience a bit of independence. She moved out of her bustling family home and into a modest apartment with a new friend named Shelley. They had met through mutual acquaintances and quickly bonded over shared youthful adventures. Shelley, however, was a bit of an enigma to Pamela's family. She was 18, often described as slightly awkward and heavily guarded about her past. It seemed Shelley carried the invisible weight of a difficult childhood, marked by complex family dynamics and a deeply strict father she desperately wished to avoid living with again. For Shelley, moving in with the warm, inclusive Pamela felt like finally grasping onto a real sense of family. To make ends meet in their new independent life, Pamela secured a bustling job at a popular local restaurant. She loved the fast-paced environment, the friendly banter with the regular customers, and the camaraderie of the kitchen staff. In August of that year, she happily reconnected with an old high school sweetheart named Bobby. Their romance rekindled slowly and sweetly, filled with evening drives and shared laughter. Pamela's life was a joyful whirlwind of family dinners, work shifts, and hanging out with her vibrant circle of friends. But that beautiful rhythm abruptly stopped on the 16th of September. It began with a phone call from Shelley to Paul, asking if he knew where Pamela was, casually mentioning she had not come home the previous night. Paul, knowing his daughter's responsible nature, felt a cold knot of worry tighten in his chest. When Pamela missed her scheduled shift at the restaurant on Monday, a highly uncharacteristic move, Paul immediately contacted the authorities. Now, learning the tragic outcome, Paul revealed a crucial, deeply suspicious detail to the detectives. He had discovered that Pamela's car, her purse, and all her essential belongings had been sitting quietly at the apartment the entire time she was missing. Shelley had completely failed to mention this glaring fact to any parent. Leaving behind a purse and a vehicle meant their child had not simply walked away voluntarily. Furthermore, Paul shared that the roommate dynamic had recently soured. Financial stress over unpaid rent had taken a toll, and Pamela had confided in her father that she was ready to move back into the comforting embrace of her family home. She had planned to gently break the news to Shelley, knowing how deeply Shelley relied on her. With this new perspective, the detectives focused their attention on Shelley. During an extensive interview in early October, Shelley painted a vastly different picture of harmony, downplaying any financial strife. When pressed to detail her whereabouts on the night Pamela vanished, Shelley wove a complex, meandering tale. She claimed she finished work, picked up her boyfriend, Ray, grabbed some fast food, and spent the entire night driving around and visiting various friends' apartments to watch movies, finally returning home as the sun began to rise. The detectives, highly skilled at detecting the subtle tremors of deception, felt Shelley was purposefully deflecting. To be thorough, they immediately interviewed Pamela's boyfriend, Bobby. Bobby openly shared that he had spent the early evening with Pamela, sitting in his car near the town courthouse, a popular spot for the local youth to gather, chat, and watch the cars cruise by. He explained he had to leave for his evening work shift around 9:30, and Pamela had mentioned she was just going to head home and relax. Bobby's employer quickly confirmed his alibi, entirely removing him from the cloud of suspicion. The investigators then circled back to Shelley's boyfriend, Ray, hoping to solidify her timeline. However, Ray's memory of the night was remarkably vague. When detectives pointed out the glaring inconsistencies between his hazy recollections and Shelley's detailed timeline, Ray became defensive, expressing frustration with the questions and abruptly ending the conversation. His inability or refusal to corroborate Shelley's story only deepened the mystery. Digging further into the social circles, the detectives interviewed the friends Shelley claimed to have visited that night. The truth that emerged was startlingly different from Shelley's narrative. Her friends recalled that Shelley was not enjoying a casual movie night. She was visibly angry, aggressively searching for Pamela. They vividly remembered Shelley making deeply concerning statements, loudly blaming Pamela for every problem in her life, and declaring her intent to find her and handle the situation. More disturbingly, several acquaintances reluctantly shared that Shelley had a bizarre, dark habit of boasting about her theoretical knowledge of how to make a person disappear without a trace, spinning wild tales of hidden mountain shafts and erasing evidence. Alarmed by these dark revelations, the detectives secured warrants to thoroughly search the apartment shared by the two young women. They worked meticulously, dusting for fingerprints, checking every floorboard and corner. However, the apartment yielded absolutely nothing. It was clean, devoid of any physical evidence or scientific markers that could indicate a struggle. Without solid proof, and facing a wall of circumstantial rumors, the investigation reached a frustrating plateau. Determined to find a thread, they shifted their focus back to the forest where Pamela was found. Through persistent community outreach, they learned of a large, rowdy gathering of youths at the fire pit on the night Pamela disappeared. The local deputies had even responded to noise complaints that evening, briefly dispersing the crowd, tracking down the attendees. Detectives finally found a few individuals who confidently placed Pamela at the gathering. As is common in tight-knit communities, the rumor mill had churned out incredibly wild, fantastical stories. Whispers of secret societies and elaborate, theatrical rituals echoed to the town's coffee shops and high school hallways. The dedicated investigators patiently chased down every single one of these outlandish tales, systematically proving them to be nothing more than imaginative fabrications of bored teenagers. Months slowly turned into a year. The leaves changed colors, the winter snows melted, and the case of the beautiful girl with the bright smile began to grow devastatingly cold. Then, in the summer of 1989, a seasoned detective reviewing the massive file of witness statements noticed a tiny, overlooked detail. A few obscure interviews briefly mentioned a completely different rumor. A scuffle at the forest gathering between Pamela and another local girl named Melinda. The story suggested a brief, heated argument that had resulted in a minor physical altercation. The new theory posited that perhaps Melinda, carrying leftover anger, had returned to the forest later that night. The police quickly brought 18-year-old Melinda in for questioning. Melinda was terrified but incredibly steadfast in her denial. She vehemently swore she had never argued with Pamela, let alone engaged in a physical dispute. She provided a rock-solid alibi, detailing a completely separate gathering she had attended at a local motel, an event verified by the motel manager, who had asked their loud group to leave. Despite her alibi, the pressure on Melinda was immense. The authorities, desperate for a breakthrough, even summoned her before a grand jury, hoping the formal setting would shake a confession loose. When she maintained her innocence, she was briefly charged with perjury based entirely on conflicting, unreliable gossip of a few teenagers. It was a deeply traumatic ordeal for the young woman, who spent 2 incredibly stressful years fighting the baseless charges before the authorities finally conceded their error, dropping the case entirely due to an absolute lack of credible evidence. Melinda, heartbroken by the accusation, packed her bags and moved to Nevada, seeking a fresh start away from the whispers. Once again, the investigation stalled. The files were tucked away into cardboard boxes, officially labeled as a cold case. Years passed, the world moved forward, technology advanced, and the town of Prescott continued its quiet existence. Paul, Pamela's father, carried the heavy burden of unresolved grief with immense grace, firmly believing that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, would eventually find the light of day. He chose to focus on the beautiful memories of his daughter, keeping her joyful spirit alive in the hearts of his family. Then, on a bright day in May of 1991, nearly 3 years after Pamela's tragic departure, an unexpected and shocking discovery forced the town to confront its shadows once more. A group of adventurous college students, exploring the rugged terrain and historical sites outside the city limits, stumbled upon an abandoned vertical mining shaft. Peering into the depths, they spotted something highly unusual caught on the old wooden supports. The county sheriff's recovery team was immediately dispatched. With careful precision, they retrieved the incredibly tragic find. The medical examiner quickly determined it was a young adult male who had passed away several weeks prior. Through careful analysis of dental records, the identity was confirmed, sending a profound shockwave through the police department. The young man was Ray, the very same Ray who had been the boyfriend of Shelley, Pamela's former roommate. Ray's loving family had reported him missing just days earlier. He was an incredibly responsible, deeply loved young man with a bright future, actively studying to become a commercial airline pilot. His family knew something was terribly wrong when he failed to show up for a joyous family wedding in California, an event he had been excitedly preparing for. When the detectives visited Ray's family, the grief-stricken relatives immediately pointed toward Shelley. They explained that Ray had been planning a major life transition. He was preparing to move back to California to pursue his aviation dreams, and he had made the difficult decision to end his relationship with Shelley, planning to leave her behind in Arizona. The seasoned investigators immediately recognized a chilling, deeply disturbing pattern. 2 individuals, Pamela and Ray, both intricately tied to Shelley, had both decided to separate themselves from her, whether by moving out or ending a romance. And both had subsequently met profoundly tragic, mysterious ends. This was no longer a coincidence. It was a blaring alarm. Armed with this undeniable connection, the investigators secured a comprehensive search warrant for the residence Shelley and Ray shared. When the detectives approached Shelley's vehicle parked outside, the heavy, unmistakable scent of tragedy immediately hit them. A thorough, scientifically precise examination of the vehicle's trunk revealed the undeniable truth. The forensic technicians discovered clear genetic evidence, matching Ray's specific blood type, confirming the vehicle had been used to transport him. Furthermore, a crucial piece of physical evidence, a clear, undeniable fingerprint belonging to Shelley, was meticulously recovered from a flashlight found deep inside the abandoned mine shaft. With the weight of science and physical evidence firmly against her, the police officially arrested Shelley in early June of 1991. The overwhelming proof left her defense with very few options. After navigating the complex judicial system for 2 years, Shelley finally agreed to a negotiated plea, accepting a charge of second-degree resolution. As part of the legal agreement, Shelley was required to provide a truthful account of what had transpired. In a quiet, emotionally flat voice, she told the court that she and Ray had driven out to the peaceful desert to gaze at the stars. As Ray lay comfortably on the hood of the car, looking up at the vast universe, he gently broke the news that he was moving away, ending their relationship, and taking his beloved dogs with him. Shelley confessed that in that moment, a wave of uncontrollable, irrational anger completely overtook her. Following the tragic act, She claimed she was overcome by panic, covering him with a blanket before hiding him in her vehicle for weeks, eventually using a heavy-duty truck to transport him to the remote mine shaft she had often boasted about knowing. Shelley was sentenced to 20 long years in the state penitentiary, while the conviction brought a necessary sense of closure to Ray's heartbroken family. The family of Pamela Pitts watched from the sidelines, their own painful questions remaining unanswered. They felt a profound sense of relief that Shelley was finally removed from society, unable to inflict pain upon anyone else. Yet they harbored a deep, quiet hope that her incarceration would finally give the investigators the leverage needed to solve Pamela's mystery. However, the wheels of justice often turn with agonizing slowness. Despite their strong suspicions, the detectives still lacked the concrete, physical evidence required to officially link Shelley to Pamela's case. They could not simply rely on a pattern of behavior. They needed absolute proof. And so, 18 long, quiet years passed. The original detectives retired. New generations of officers walked the halls of the precinct, and the files gathered dust in the cold case archives. Yet, for a family bound by love, hope never truly fades. Paul and his children continued to celebrate Pamela's birthdays, sharing funny stories about her artistic attempts and her boundless energy. They transformed their desire for justice into a quiet, steadfast patience, trusting that the universe would eventually balance the scales. In the crisp spring of 2011, exactly 23 years after Pamela's bright light was extinguished, a dedicated cold case team decided to completely reopen the investigation. A brilliant, highly motivated detective was assigned to the massive files. Interestingly, his superiors purposefully withheld the details of Ray's tragedy, wanting the detective to view Pamela's case with entirely fresh, unbiased eyes. It did not take long for the sharp detective to spot the glaring anomalies in Shelley's original statements. When he was finally briefed on the full history, including Shelley's conviction, the puzzle pieces rapidly clicked into place. He realized he was dealing with an individual who possessed a demonstrated, profound capability for extreme actions when faced with abandonment. Shelley was not just a disgruntled roommate. She was the single common denominator, the only person with a known, intense grievance against Pamela on that fateful night. Knowing that Shelley's 20-year sentence was nearing its completion, the detectives formulated a strategic plan. They visited Shelley in the state prison, engaging her in a seemingly casual, hour-long conversation. They did not accuse her. They simply, gently reminded her that the investigation into Pamela's case was still highly active. It was a calculated move, designed to rattle her cage just enough to provoke a reaction. Following the visit, the authorities meticulously monitored every single telephone call Shelley made from the prison facility. Over the next few months, she made 97 calls. A dedicated investigator sat in a quiet room, headphones on, listening to hours of mundane conversations about life, future plans, and the weather. Sadly, none of the calls yielded a confession they so desperately needed. In May of 2011, having served her mandated time, Shelley walked out the prison doors, a free woman. She quickly assimilated back into society, securing employment, getting married, and adopting a completely new surname, seemingly leaving her dark past entirely behind her. Another 6 years rolled by. The investigation faced the usual hurdles of shifting department priorities and overwhelming caseloads. But the cold case detectives absolutely refused to let Pamela's memory fade. In the spring of 2017, acting on a sudden burst of intuition, the lead detective decided to personally re-listen to every single one of those 97 recorded prison phone calls. It is often the most obscure detail that cracks a foundation. Buried deep within hours of audio, the detective heard a conversation between Shelley and her father shortly after the police visit. Her father sounded highly concerned, asking if they were okay and discussing the need for legal representation. Then, the father made a profound, telling statement. He expressed his own decades-long confusion, stating that he had wondered for 20 years what had truly happened, gently chastising Shelley for never telling him the actual truth of that night, instead of offering a denial or proclaiming her innocence to her own father. Shelley offered only a heavy, completely silent pause. To the highly trained ear of the detective, that silence was absolutely deafening. It was the missing puzzle piece. Combined with the extensive circumstantial evidence, the documented history of threats, the completely shattered alibis, and her proven capability for such actions, the district attorney finally agreed they had enough to proceed. On the 2nd of June, 2017, the dedicated detective walked up to Shelley's new home. When he introduced himself and stated his department, a look of profound, defiant resignation washed over her face. She knew instantly why he was there. After nearly 30 years, Shelley was officially placed under arrest for the tragedy